Hey guys, Io here with part 1 of the Rating UI Essentials workshop and tutorial. Part 1 will cover action bar customization using Bartender4. This is part 1 of a 3-part series, so if you're looking for part 2 on raid frames, which I manage with Voodoo, or part 3 on event notifications, which I manage with WeakAuras, you can find links to those guides in the comments section below. Bartender is an add-on that allows us to customize action bars in various ways. By default, we're used to looking at 3 action bars at the bottom of the screen on top of the Blizzard art bar, and you have the option to use 2 additional bars on the right-hand side of your screen. However, Blizzard actually gives us access to 10 action bars, and using Bartender, we can manage those in multiple ways. This includes resizing them, changing the number of buttons up to a maximum of 12 per bar. You can reshape the bars into columns, grids, whatever you like. And you can selectively show or hide some bars in combat or on mouse over. You can also use Bartender to manage your key bindings. Using an add-on like Bartender allows us to have more buttons available to us while also making the most efficient use of screen space, resulting in a clean, effective UI. Now, I use a Razer Naga mouse, so I'm going to set up my bars in grids that mirror the grid that's on my mouse. However, using the tools that you learn in here, you can just as easily customize the UI to whatever suits your needs the best. Now, you'll notice that my character screen is completely default. I've done no setup whatsoever on this character. He has a completely fresh interface, and the only thing that I've done is installed and enabled Bartender. So over the course of these 3 guides, I'm going to show you how to transform this basic UI into something a little bit more useful and efficient. To get started, open up the Bartender window by typing /bartender in chat, or by right-clicking the Bartender icon on the minimap. Note that if you left-click the Bartender icon, it will highlight your bars green and unlock them for editing. We'll do that a little bit later, so for now let's keep them locked, and right-click the icon to bring open the window. Note that you can drag this window around the screen by clicking the title bar, so we'll put it up and out of the way. Within this window there are 2 main frames. On the left, there is a list of all the bars available for customization. On the right are any customization options for that bar. So the first thing we're going to do is get rid of the default Blizzard art bar. The art bar is kind of clunky, it takes up a lot of space. I don't personally like it, so I'm going to get rid of it. So to do that, I'm going to click Blizzard art bar and uncheck enabled, and away it goes. Now I also don't use the XP bar, the reputation bar, or the micro menu, so I'm going to get rid of those as well. If you want to bring them back as part of your UI, you'll have the tools and the knowledge to do so and make them fit in a nice clean fashion later. Right. So I'm going to go to micro menu, uncheck it, reputation bar, uncheck it, XP bar, uncheck it, and you'll notice all those elements have disappeared. Now, one more thing to note about Bartender is that by default it collapses your 5 inventory bags into 1 backpack icon. To bring back the traditional 5 bags, you can just click bag bar and uncheck the 1 bag, and it will decollapse them. Alright, I'm going to keep mine collapsed for the most part, but the option's there if you want to change it for yourself. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to modify this main default spell bar here. Alright, so to do that, first of all, we have to know its name. Now, you can find this out by unlocking the bars, either by unchecking the lock button here, or by left-clicking the bartender icon on the minimap. Now, we'll drag this up to the center of the screen, and you'll notice that in the center it says bar 1. The name will always be listed in the center of the box when it's unlocked. Alright, if you're going to customize a bar, you should relock it before you do so, because some of the settings, such as the transparency, you won't necessarily notice while they're unlocked for editing. So I'm going to relock these, and we'll get started with bar 1 here. Now, note that I use a Razer Naga mouse, which has a 12-button grid on the side of it, so I'm going to customize my UI for my mouse, and I'm going to make 3 sets of button grids that match up with my mouse and modifier buttons. You'll see the tools to modify your UI and make a nice clean one, however you prefer. So after this, feel free to follow mine, or just customize it to whatever suits your needs. Alright, so we'll start by going up to bar 1, and general settings. Now within these settings, you'll see alpha is transparency. Alright, I'm going to leave this at 100%. and scale is the size. I'm going to scale my buttons down to about 0.75. Note that you can use the slider or just type a value in and then hit enter. All right. Padding is the space between the buttons, which I'm going to leave at a default of 6. And buttons is the number of buttons available on that bar. Note there is a maximum of 12, but you can resize it to whatever you like. This is especially helpful if you just want to put 1, 2, or 3 buttons up to maybe show trinkets that can be used, or you want to list 4 major cooldowns on a separate bar. It's very useful for that reason. Right. Now the other option here is rows. This will turn the default row into a grid, a column, or whatever you prefer. So you have however many buttons you specify here, and this will split them between a certain number of rows. So since I have a 12 button grid on my mouse, I'm going to change this to 4. And you can see it changes it to 4 rows and 3 columns. Note that if the number of buttons is not divisible by the number of rows, it won't do anything. So if I change this to 5, nothing will happen. But if I change it to 6, the 12 buttons will go into 2 columns. Okay, so I'll put this back to 4. And that's my first button grid. And that's pretty good for now. We're going to place it later. And we're going to set up this, this bar here and this bar here to kind of match this format. Okay. So to find out the names, I'm going to unlock it. And I can see this is bar 6. So I'll drag that up, relock it, and switch to bar 6. Again, I'm going to change my buttons, my rows to 4, and leaving the buttons at 12. Alright, and I'm going to change my scale to 0.75. And I'm going to do the same thing with this bar, which is bar 5. Right. I'll unlock it and drag it up. Right. Fix that on 6 first. There we go. And bar 5, I'll make this into 4 and 0.75. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock these, and I'm going to place them neatly on the center bottom of my screen. Now the reason my bars are set up like this are because, as you can see in the corner, you'll see a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on this grid, and on here you'll see S1, S2, S3, so on and so forth, and here C1, C2, C3. Those are because I have my key binding set up. So this button here corresponds to the 1 button of the grid on my mouse. This is the same button if I'm holding Shift, and this is the same button if I'm holding Control. So all 3 of these are easily within reach. Now that that's all set up, I'm going to take 1 more bar and lay it flat on top here. I'll use this for my keyboard bindings and just some combat utility spells. So we're actually going to grab a bar from the corner of the screen. So if we unlock it, we'll grab bar 3 here. And what we can do is, on the bar 3 options, if you click button grid, you'll see you can actually see all the empty spaces on that bar where you could place a spell. Alright, so we're going to unlock this. Move this here where it's easier to work with, and we'll change, let's see, this bar down. First let's make it flat. Alright, so you can see by changing rows from 12 to 1, it turns it into 1 horizontal bar. And we'll change the scale down to 0.75 to match the other ones. Now I'm going to use, say, 4 buttons here. Okay, and I'll get rid of the rest of them. So we'll bring this down to 4. Okay, there we go. And we'll drag this right on top. Okay, relock it. And out of the spell book we'll grab some basic utility spells here. And since I am a holy priest and I usually want to put these here, I'll throw my Sanctuary and Serenity chakras right there on Q and Shift Q. And let's grab a Leap of Faith and Levitate, just so we have those available on the fly. And there you can see, we have some basic bars set up with all of the combat spells and bindings that I would need to use. So next what we're going to do is we're going to set up a couple bars for out-of-combat utility spells. So things you want to have access to, but that you don't necessarily want to see on your screen all the time. All right? So to do that, we're going to grab an extra bar from over here. And to do that, we can uncheck to see what we have available. Now, you can see that we're starting to run out of bars to use, but in fact, if we look, this is 4, 5, 6, bar 1, and bar 3, most of these are actually hidden by default. So we can go through and say bar 10, bar 9, bar 7, and there's a whole lot more bars here that are hidden from view that we could just enable and use. So actually, since it's over here, we're going to use bar 10, and we'll disable these other guys. All right, turn off 9, and 7. There we go. And we'll use bar 10. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to take bar 10 and put him into a nice little pocket here and have some extra stuff there. And to make this nice and neat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into 2 rows. All right. And we're going to tuck this down in the corner here. All right. And for now, we'll show the button grid just so we can see what we're working with. All right. And we'll relock it. Now, one of the things you can do is in the visibility tab, you have a bunch of options here. Now, we could put hide in combat and to check this. And what that would mean is when you are in combat, this whole grid will not show up at all. You will not be able to see it. You can go with that. That's the easiest way. What we're actually going to do here is we're going to go with a fade out alpha. So we'll check this box that says fade out, and the alpha is what it will fade out to. So you'll notice that it pretty much just disappeared. It's actually 10% visibility, so 90% transparency. And you could change that to 0 if you want. And the delay is 0.2 seconds. What that means is that when you're not hovering over that bar and you take your mouse off of it, after 0.2 seconds, it will fade to 90% transparency. But if I hover my mouse over it, it'll appear right back. Right? And the difference in that is up to you. If you want to hide a interactive element, so later if you have a damage meter or something else you want to put in that corner during combat, so that when it shows up you don't want to accidentally click a button, then it would be much better to hide it in combat. But for these purposes, I'm just going to put stuff there and leave it on an alpha. Alright, so now that it's in there, I'll go into my spellbook here, and I'll throw some generic stuff on there. So, like cooking fire, my enchanting, disenchanting. I would probably want a hotkey, but I'll just throw it out there. Archaeology, right? And if I go through, maybe I'll pull up some mounts here and make this top row ground mount. We'll put a flying mount on there, and just in case, we'll throw on a sea turtle for swimming around. All right. And I'll close that out. And what you can see now is it's not taking up screen space, it's not distracting from your attention, but if you want anything and you know it's down there, you can hover over it and everything's easily available to you. Alright, a nice thing I find to put in a little bar like this are also mage cakes and things like that that you carry with you that you don't necessarily want to look through your inventory for. And actually, before we're done, that's a little large for my screen resolution, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to General Settings, and I'll shrink it down a little bit. And then I'll tuck it right there in the corner. And what I can use, I'll also put the back bar right over there, so it's out of the way. And you know what, just for consistency, I'll make the back bar we'll hide the back bar in combat and make it fade out so we don't accidentally click it during combat. But when we're out of combat, we can just hover over it and it's there. Now, one other bar to note that's not necessarily intuitive to look at is this right here. This extra action button bar is nice to be able to move. When you're in a raid, such as Ultraxion, the Heroic Will button, or on the Madness of Deathwing on the Ysera platform, the Dream button. When that button appears, it has a name. It's called Extra Action Button 1. And you can macro it, but if you also want to move where that button appears, that's actually this bar here, and you can drag that to wherever you want. So that way, if you also use another raiding add-ons, such as Deadly Boss mods, you don't have certain bars covering each other, or you don't have it covering your action button that you need to click for raid purposes. Lastly, if you are a pet class that uses a pet bar, you can also move that around, and you'll see it's clearly labeled here on my screen while they're unlocked. and you can customize that to a small degree. The pet bar does not count like a normal bar, and it is limited to the number of buttons, so unfortunately you can't extend it to have 12 buttons like you can a normal bar. However, most options are still available. You can change its visibility, its padding, and how it's broken up. In addition to the customization options I showed you, there are a couple more. In the general settings, click through just makes those buttons unclickable. So if you had a bar, for example this one, and you wanted it showing up here, just so you could see what was on cooldown, maybe you have some spells such as Divine Hymn, Hymn of Hope, and you just want to easily see, track their cooldown, you could put that up by your character, and if you click through, then you won't accidentally click and trigger one of those actions. In addition, there's also a tab here called Positioning, that if you go to that, you can fine-tune the position of any grid if you're very neurotic or want it to line up just perfectly with other UI elements that you might introduce. The last function of Bartender that's actually very, very useful that we're going to go over is the key bindings functionality. So when you use the Bartender key bindings, you can override the Blizzard ones. Be aware that these will save as part of your Blizzard settings, so even if you uninstall Bartender, your key bindings will remain. They are permanent, unless you of course change them again in Bartender. And to enter key binding mode, you can just click this button here. It says key bindings. Now, while this key binding mode window is up, you can hover over any active button. And you'll see here, if I hover here, it tells me that this particular button is bound to number 1. Alright? If I want to rebind it to another key, say 2, I could just hit 2, right, over top of it, and it will rebind it to 2. There we go. Alright. Now if you want to remove a key binding, just hover over it and hit escape. Alright, and you can see that it ended up automatically removing the button 2 here. Alright, so I'm going to press 1 on top of that, and 2 on top of here, just to restore what they were. And this is a very quick and easy way to go over your bars and assign custom key bindings. And when you're all done with your key bindings, just click OK to save them. Note that I don't advise using the character-specific key bindings because I like to keep one consistent setup for all my bars and bindings across my characters. You can if you want to, although it does get confusing when you have too many profiles for too many tunes. Alright, that concludes the action bar workshop and tutorial. If you like this video, please check out parts 2 and 3 of the Rating UI Essentials series, and thanks for watching.